Welcome to this deep dive. It's all about the connections between Piro the Philokalia and modern character education. You've given us some really thought-provoking material, especially that academic paper. Relevansi Pemikiran, Platon, dan Nilai, dari, Philokalia dalam Pendidikan Karakter.
Wow. Okay, so let's jump right in. It seems like the core idea here is that both Plato and this Philokalia text, even though they come from totally different worlds, have something powerful to say about how we build character, something that's maybe even more relevant today than ever.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Both of these sources, they really push back against the idea that education is just about, stuffing your head with facts. They both point toward this deeper goal of shaping who you are as a person.
So not just knowing stuff, but becoming someone.
Yeah.
And we're starting with Plato, right? Give us the quick version. What was his big idea about education?
Well, Plato believed that education was fundamentally about shaping the soul toward goodness. He didn't see the soul as some mystical, airy thing, but as having three distinct parts that need to be balanced and harmonized.
The rational part, the emotional part, and the affective part. Those are our desires.
Okay, I can see that playing out already. Like, how many times have you wanted to eat the entire pint of ice cream, but your rational side is like, maybe just a spoonful? That's a daily struggle right there.
Exactly. And Plato would say that true education is about strengthening that rational part so it can guide your emotions and desires toward what's truly good and just. Think about it, you, the listener. How often do your emotions or desires pull you in one direction while your reason tells you to go another?
It's like that angel and devil on your shoulders, but instead it's logic versus a craving for cookies.
Right.
But how does that translate into actual character development?
That's where this idea of paideia comes in.
Paideia.
Yeah. Think of it as the active process of cultivating virtue. For the ancient Greeks, paideia was more than just schooling. It was about shaping citizens who could contribute to the common good.
So it's not just about being smart. It's about developing those qualities that make you a good person and a good member of society. Courage, justice, temperance, those kinds of things.
You got it. Now, fast forward a few centuries, and we have the Philokalia. This collection of early Christian mystical writings might seem totally unrelated, but it actually echoes a lot of what Plato was saying.
Wait, so ancient Greek philosophy and early Christian mysticism have something in common. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
While the Philokalia comes from a very specific religious context, its emphasis on self-discipline and purifying your desires to achieve spiritual growth really resonates with Plato's ideas.
So even though they come from different traditions, they're both saying that mastering yourself is key to becoming a better person, whether you frame that in a philosophical or a spiritual way.
Precisely. And there's this really powerful quote from the Philokalia that I think captures the essence of this idea. Observe how it loves here fast. Here corrects our insensitive power through acts of compassion, purifies the intellect through prayer, and through fasting withers desire.
Okay, break that down for us. What does that actually look like in practice? How can we correct our insensitive power or wither desire in the real world?
It's suggesting that practices like compassion, prayer, and fasting can help us refine different aspects of ourselves. Now, I know fasting might sound a bit intense for most people today, but the underlying principle is what's important here.
So it's not necessarily about literally denying yourself food, but more about learning to control your impulses and direct your energy towards something more meaningful. It's like how an athlete trains for a marathon. They have to have the discipline to push past discomfort and resist those temptations to stay on the couch.
That's a fantastic analogy, and this ties directly back to Plato's concept of purifying the soul, getting rid of those bad habits, those vices that hold you back to make room for truth and justice.
So both Plato and the Philokalia are saying that building character is an active process. It's not something that just happens to you. It's something you have to work at. But this all sounds pretty serious. What's the end goal here? Where's all this self-discipline and purification leading?
Well, the Philokalia talks about theosis, which in the Christian context means union with God.
Okay, that's a pretty lofty goal. But I'm guessing there's a more general application here, even if you're not coming from a religious perspective.
Absolutely. Think of it as aligning yourself with a higher purpose. Whether you call that truth goodness or even just your best self, it's about recognizing that we're all part of something bigger and our lives have meaning and purpose beyond just our own individual needs and desires.
I like that. It's like finding your place in the universe, figuring out how you fit into the big picture.
Exactly. And this connects beautifully with Plato's idea of the form of the good. He believed that there's this ultimate, perfect form of goodness that exists beyond our everyday experience.
So it's like an ideal we're always striving toward, even if we can never fully reach it. But how do we even begin to align ourselves with this higher purpose? It all sounds a bit abstract.
Well, both Plato and the Philokalia offer some practical guidance here. For starters, they both emphasize the importance of cultivating virtues. Think of virtues as those qualities that help us live a good life and contribute to the well-being of others. Things like honesty, compassion, courage, and justice.
Okay, so it's not just about having a vague sense of wanting to be a good person. It's about actively developing specific qualities that will help you become that person. But we hear about virtues all the time. What's different about how these ancient thinkers approach it?
It's not just about knowing the definitions. It's about understanding how those virtues actually operate in different situations and developing the strength of character to put them into practice. For example, it's one thing to know that honesty is important, but it's another thing entirely to actually tell the truth when it's difficult or when there might be consequences.
So it's about embodying those virtues, not just having them as some abstract ideal you admire from afar.
Exactly. And that's where the whole self-discipline piece comes in. Remember askerosis. It's about actively training yourself, pushing yourself to resist those impulses that lead you away from virtue and toward those less than ideal choices.
It's like when you know you should get up early to exercise, but that warm bed is just so tempting. It's those everyday choices where our character is really tested. So how do we build that willpower muscle to make the virtuous choice more often?
Both Plato and the Philokalia would say it's an ongoing process. It's about being mindful of those moments of choice, recognizing your weaknesses and temptations, and then consciously choosing the more virtuous path, even when it's hard.
It's about being intentional, right? Making conscious choices instead of just going on autopilot. But before you can even start training yourself, you need to know what areas need work. And that brings us back to introspection, right? How can we actually get better at looking inward?
The good news is it doesn't have to be some big, scary, soul-searching ordeal. It can be as simple as taking a few minutes each day to quietly reflect on your thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Like a mental check-in.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what were my motivations today? Did I live up to my values? What could I have done differently? Did I let my emotions get the best of me, or did I manage to stay grounded and make a rational choice?
You know, I've been trying to journal more lately, and I find that really helpful. Just getting those thoughts out of my head and onto paper helps me see things more clearly.
That's fantastic. And it's interesting that you mentioned journaling because the research you provided actually highlights how valuable journaling can be for this kind of self-reflection. It allows you to track patterns in your behavior, identify your triggers, and see your progress over time.
So I've got the virtue training, the self-discipline, the introspection. It's starting to feel like we're building a pretty solid foundation for character development here.
And here's where things get even more interesting. Remember how we talked about aligning ourselves with a higher purpose? Both Plato and the Philokalia go beyond just individual growth. They connect that personal transformation to something much bigger than ourselves.
So it's not just about self-improvement for self-improvement's sake. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our individual choices have ripple effects that impact the world around us.
Precisely. And this idea of interconnectedness is where I think we find one of the most powerful links between Plato and the Philokalia.
Okay, I'm all ears. How does this idea of interconnectedness actually play out in our daily lives?
It's about recognizing that we're not isolated individuals, but part of a larger web of life. And that means our actions, even the seemingly small ones, have consequences.
So it's about expanding that circle of concern beyond just our own little bubble and thinking about how our choices impact others and the world around us.
Exactly. And this doesn't have to involve grand gestures. It can be as simple as being kind to a stranger, standing up for someone being treated unfairly, or choosing to live more sustainably to protect the environment.
It's about bringing those big ideals of goodness and justice down to earth and putting them into practice in our everyday interactions.
Right. And the more we do that, the more we start to see those connections between our individual lives and the larger web of existence. We begin to understand that our personal growth is not separate from the well-being of others or the health of the planet.
It's a shift in perspective, isn't it? Instead of seeing ourselves as separate, isolated individuals, we start to recognize our interconnectedness.
And that realization can be incredibly empowering. It gives us a sense of responsibility, but also a sense of belonging and purpose.
So it's not just about what we do, but how we see ourselves in the world and how we understand our role in making the world a better place. But let's be honest, none of this is easy. how do we stay motivated and keep moving forward on this path, especially when things get tough?
Well, both Plato and the Philokalia would say that we don't have to do it alone. They both emphasize the vital role of community.
Community. Okay, I'm curious to see how that fits into this whole character building equation.
Well, think about it. None of us develop in isolation. We're shaped by the people around us, by our families, friends, teachers, and the broader communities we belong to.
So it's about recognizing that we're not on this journey alone, that we need others to support us, challenge us, and help us grow.
Precisely. Plato actually believed that education should happen within a community where people can learn from and support each other.
It's like that old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. But we're talking about more than just kids, right? This applies to all of us no matter what stage of life we're in.
Absolutely. And the Philokalia highlights the importance of spiritual guidance from elders and the support of fellow seekers who are on the same path.
It's about finding your tribe, those people who get you and who can help you become the best version of yourself. Kind of like having a personal board of advisors for your life.
I love that analogy. And it's a two-way street, too. It's not just about receiving support, but also about being there for others, offering guidance and encouragement when they need it.
It makes you realize that we're all in this together. We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life.
And that brings us back to aligning ourselves with a higher purpose. When we work together supporting each other's growth, we can create a ripple effect of positive change that extends far beyond ourselves.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where our personal growth intersects with our contribution to something larger than ourselves. But I can't help but wonder, how do we translate all of this into practical action? If you were designing a character education program based on all of these ideas, what would it look like?
That's a great question, and it's one that really gets to the heart of why this deep dive is so relevant.
Right, because it's not just about understanding these concepts in theory, it's about figuring out how to actually put them into practice in our lives.
Exactly. So if I were to design this program, I'd definitely start with Plato's emphasis on those three parts of the soul. We need to teach young people, and ourselves, frankly, how to understand their emotions, their desires, and how to use reason to guide their choices.
It's like giving them an inner compass to navigate the complexities of life.
Precisely. And alongside that, we need to incorporate the Philokalia's focus on ascesis, that training for virtue. It's about providing practical tools and strategies for developing self-control, resilience, and those inner strengths that help us make choices that align with our values.
So it's not just about knowing what's right, but having the tools and the strength to actually do what's right even when it's hard.
You got it. And we can't forget introspection. We need to create space for people to reflect on their experiences, values, and motivations.
It's about helping them become more self-aware, to connect the dots between their thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Exactly. Journaling, creative expression, even mindfulness practices can be incredibly valuable here. It's about giving people the space and tools to explore their inner landscapes.
So we're talking about a holistic approach, right? One that integrates the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual. It's not just about one or the other, but about nurturing the whole person.
Absolutely. And let's not forget community and mentorship. We need to create learning environments that foster connection, collaboration, and support.
It's about surrounding people with positive role models and giving them opportunities to learn from and with each other. It really does take a village, doesn't it?
It truly does. And finally, we need to remember the importance of purpose. We need to help people connect their individual journeys to something larger than themselves. Whether that's through service to others, environmental stewardship, or pursuing a passion that makes a difference in the world, it's about helping them find their unique contribution, their way of leaving the world a little brighter than they found it.
That's beautifully said. It's about recognizing that each of us has something special to offer, and when we find that thing and put it out into the world, it creates a ripple effect that benefits everyone.
And that's where the true magic happens, when we empower people to become not just successful individuals, but also active, engaged citizens who are committed to making a positive impact.
Wow, this has been such a rich and insightful conversation. We've gone from ancient Greek philosophy to early Christian mysticism, and we've landed right here in the 21st century with a whole new perspective on how to build character and live a life of meaning and purpose.
And the best part is it's not just a bunch of abstract ideas. These are principles we can all apply in our own lives starting today. It's about making those small daily choices to cultivate virtue, to strengthen our self-discipline, to look inward with honesty and courage, to connect with our communities, and to find our unique way of contributing to something bigger than ourselves. It's a lifelong journey for sure, but it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this lingering question. How can we each in our own unique ways contribute to creating a culture that truly values and supports character development? It's a question worth pondering, and I hope it stays with you long after this deep dive ends. Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery, and until next time, keep diving deep.